Life's much easier without that worthless wife.
Yeah, but I need her around, 'cause she's my ATM. The day after I left for a business trip, I was at the front door of my houses, where Harry and Karen were waiting for me. And I overheard their conversation, both laughing loudly. Am I an ATM? Worthless wife? As soon as I heard that, I felt a surge of anger, ready to confront them. But I held back my anger and decided to leave quietly. They always said the reason our family wasn't working out was because of me. But from what they just said, it was clear I was their lifeline. To them, I'm not even a person. They must just think of me as some money-carrying robot. Even though I was at the front door, neither of them seemed to notice I'd come back from my trip. And that made sense because I had told them I would be gone for 2 days. So why did I come home so early? It had something to do with advice from a certain someone. My name is Catherine Davis, 48 years old. I'm married, but even at this age, I'm still working full-time. Well, actually, I'm the CEO of my company now. In simple terms, I'm the boss. When I was young, I never imagined it would come to this. I always dreamed of being a stay-at-home wife. So why am I still working so hard? There's a clear reason. My marriage to Harry, my current husband, completely changed my life. I was a shy bookworm from a young age, and after graduating college, I got jobs at a small publishing company. Though I worked for a publisher, most of my tasks were in sales. I wasn't good with people, but I pushed myself to overcome that, working as hard as I could. The folks at the company really took me under their wing, and I worked even harder to repay their kindness. I was lucky to be surrounded by good people, and before I knew it, I found fulfillment even in sales, which I used to dread. Eventually, I got more opportunities to do editing and proofreading, the kind of work I really wanted to do, and I poured myself even more into my job. When I heard my former college friends, who had taken other jobs, complaining about their work, I realized just how lucky I was.
I think I'm reaching my limit. At least I made it 3 years. Maybe I'll find a good marriage prospect somewhere. I aim to get married and retire from my job.
They all decided they'd try their best for 3 years and then switch jobs. You could tell just by looking at them that they were exhausted. I had overtime, and work was exhausting. But not once did I think about quitting my job. 3 years have already passed. Thinking like this made me realize just how fortunate I was, and I lived each day savoring that feeling. As more time passed, about 5 years into my job, I had an unexpected encounter, even though I never thought about quitting my job to get married. I met Harry Davis while on a sales visit, and we started dating. Harry was different from me. He was the quintessential sales guy. He was a great talker, and even introduced a deal I brought into his boss. Thanks to that, it led to a major deal, and the company I worked for made a big profit. Since he was a bit older than me, Harry became someone I looked up to, especially at such a young age. Over time, that admiration turned into love, and we became a couple. After about 3 years of dating, Harry and I decided to get married. He introduced me to his parents, and I was brought to his family's home. That's where I first met his mother and father. Both of them were easygoing and approachable, and they were overjoyed about our marriage. By that time, Harry's father was already bedridden due to illness, and his mother was taking care of him mostly alone, since Harry had to work. Despite working, Harry helped care for his father since he was still living at home. Both Harry and I planned to find a new place to live after getting married, which would leave his mother and ill father alone. From that day on, I visited Harry's family home several times. I got more opportunities to talk with his parents, and gradually, I grew fond of them. Would it be all right if I moved into your parents' place and lived with them? Feeling bad about leaving his elderly parents alone while we moved into a new place, I proposed this idea to Harry. Your dad's sick, and it's tough for your mom to handle everything alone. I think I can manage well with both of them and want to help them. Harry hesitated a bit, but eventually agreed and brought it up to his parents. At first, they both declined, saying they didn't want to be a burden, but eventually, I convinced them, and we ended up living together. Even after getting married, I continued working while managing the household with my mother-in-law, Karen. Unlike when I lived alone, I had more responsibilities, but I was genuinely happy with this life. However, 5 years into our marriage, we still hadn't had any children. Harry and his parents encouraged me, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. By the time I turned 40, I had naturally given up on having children. Harry has an older sister, but she's single with no children. It was a shame not to be able to give his parents a grandchild, so I devoted myself even more to my work. Then suddenly, loss came our way. My father-in-law, who had been ill for a long time, passed away. When he was taken to the hospital, the doctor had already said, "There's no chance of recovery." We knew a day like this would come eventually, but losing the man who treated me like his own daughter was beyond heartbreaking. It was the same for Karen, who became even more withdrawn than I did. Losing a husband she'd been with for so many years, it was only natural. Her smile vanished, and she spoke less and less. Even when I tried talking to her, she often seemed lost in thought, and Harry was clearly worried as well. But no one could ever replace my late father-in-law. The once cheerful atmosphere that Harry's parents brought into the house was gone, and the place now felt heavy and dreary. Around this time, Harry also began to change. He started speaking harshly to me, ignoring me, and everything in our life seemed to fall apart. My marriage began to crumble right after my father-in-law passed away. Harry, who had never been much of a drinker, started going out drinking almost every day. That kind of lifestyle took its toll, and one day Harry got drunk and went out of control in a pub. Though the other customers managed to restrain him, Harry ended up with a serious injury that left lasting damage to his leg. Harry had been the one to start the fight at the pub. Even though the other person was injured too, Harry's injuries were more severe, so they decided not to press charges. After some negotiations, they reached a settlement, and Harry received a large sum in compensation. On top of that, Harry, who had sustained a serious injury, started receiving a significant insurance payout every month. For him, the money is transferred, even if he doesn't work himself, and I am at work every day. Without consulting me, he decided to quit his job.
Given what happened to my body, it's better for me to take it easy rather than push myself to work. Maybe if I take my time recovering, I'll fully heal someday.
Even so, Harry started going out even more often than before. Around this time, Karen also began to regain some of her old energy. However, she had become like a completely different person, nothing like before. Losing her husband had taken a toll on her mental health, and despair and anxiety seemed to take over her heart. Her once gentle eyes had turned sharp and wild, and it was clear she found joy in berating me. Because of her many fears, Karen began to dote on Harry excessively. She treated Harry like a small child, lavishing him with affection, while she began to resent me. Seeing how drastically Karen had changed when she used to care for me as well, filled me with a deep sense of fear and sadness. The kind father and mother I knew were gone. To make things worse, even Harry was no longer on my side.
It's your fault I can't see my grandchild's face because you couldn't have children. Sweet Harry has become so reckless because of it, and now look at what's happened to him. You'll have to work for the rest of your life to repay him.
Her words were inconsistent and made no sense. She spewed unreasonable accusations at me day in and day out. Even so, every time I heard Karen say, "You couldn't have children," it cut me deeply. It was just baseless spite. It wasn't all on me. Harry could have been part of the problem too. But there was still some lingering guilt within me, and perhaps out of a sense of atonement, I poured even more effort into my work. "Harry, Karen's been acting a bit erratic lately, and there are days she seems really down. Maybe she should see a doctor?" I finally decided to bring it up with Harry, only to be immediately dismissed, and he even told his mother what I said.
You think I'm crazy? You heartless witch. Everything in this house is messed up because of you.
Although she was too old to actually get physical, Karen verbally assaulted me as if she might pounce at any moment. Her paranoia was intense, and even the way she looked at her son was off. It was clear she was mentally unwell, but there was no way I could take her to the hospital in this state. I had no choice but to endure it and continue taking care of both of them. Meanwhile, contrary to my personal life, my career was going well. The aging president of the company personally named me as the next president. He would step down to become chairman, leaving me to run the company as president. With Harry's injury compensation running out soon and the settlement money dwindling, I felt I had no choice but to accept this offer. Of course, it was an honor and a great opportunity, but when I thought of Harry and Karen, I couldn't be entirely happy about it. Harry and Karen soon learned about me becoming the president.
For someone like her to become president, this world's coming to an end. Well, she has to earn for Harry too, so I guess it's a good thing.
By then, I had no idea whether Karen was genuinely praising me or being sarcastic. There was no point in arguing, and I knew she would never go back to being the kind person she once was. Such give up had taken hold in my mind. Harry still refused to look for his job, using his lingering leg injury as his excuse. To be honest, it seemed like he had gotten much better. But if I said anything about it, they would gang up on me. Knowing that, I didn't feel like saying anything. As long as I kept working hard and making money, things wouldn't get any worse. For some reason, I truly believed that, but soon my peace was shattered. Harry started having affairs repeatedly. The first time I caught on and confronted him, he looked genuinely ashamed. But then Karen stepped in.
Who do you think is to blame for this? It's your fault he has to release his stress outside, since you couldn't give him a child. And it's also because you're always glaring at us with that scary face.
I thought infidelity would mean the end of my marriage. But when I was blamed by both of them in such an unreasonable manner, I started thinking maybe I really was at fault. Even though Karen had lost her mind, she still knew exactly how to hurt me. It was like I had been brainwashed, and all I could do was apologize repeatedly. Since then, Harry's affairs and his late-night outings became something both his mother and I tolerated. When I stopped to think calmly, I knew it was wrong. But I had no one to talk to, and I was too ashamed to bring it up with anyone at work.
You better reflect on your behavior too, you know? You're only able to live this good life because I married you. Who else would have married someone like you besides me?
Harry wanted to instill inferiority in me, to put me under his control. He wanted to make me believe that everything wrong in our family was my fault. In the beginning, they might have realized how irrational they were being towards me, but now it seemed that they were starting to truly believe they were in the right. I genuinely felt that the mother and son were losing their sanity. This wasn't sustainable. But there was nothing I could do by myself. Not knowing who to turn to for help, time just kept passing. One day, I had to go on a business trip for work. I'll be away for a couple of days, but as the president, I need to go myself. I'm really sorry, but could you use this money to order takeout and have meals with Mom? I apologized to Harry and Karen multiple times. Though they complained endlessly, they both understood that without me, their livelihood would be affected. Harry reluctantly agreed to my business trip, demanding $500 for food, saying, "This isn't enough." Grateful that he at least let me go, I gave him an extra $100 and left for the trip.
Life's much easier without that worthless wife.
Yeah, but I need her around, 'cause she's my ATM.
The day after I left for the trip, I was at the front door of my house, where Harry and Karen were waiting for me. And I overheard their conversation, both laughing loudly. Am I an ATM? Worthless wife? As soon as I heard that, I felt a surge of anger, ready to confront the two of them. But I held back that anger and decided to leave quietly. They always said that the reason our family wasn't working out was because of me. But from what they just said, it was clear I was their lifeline. To them, I wasn't even a person. They must just think of me as some money-carrying robot. Even though I was at the front door, neither of them seemed to notice that I'd come back from my trip. And that made sense because I had told them I would be gone for 2 days. So why did I come home so early? It had something to do with advice from a certain someone. About a month ago, I got a call at work saying someone wanted to talk to me.
It's a woman named Emma. Do you know her?
Feeling suspicious, I took the call.
Sorry for calling out of the blue. I'm Harry's sister. It's been a while since Dad's funeral, but I wanted to thank you for always taking care of our mom and my brother.
If she needed something from me, she could have come to the house directly, so I asked why she was calling instead.
I didn't want my mom or brother to hear. I know it's a strange thing to ask, but have you been struggling? If you'd like, could we meet in person to talk?
It was true. I hadn't seen Harry's sister since the funeral, and honestly, we weren't close. When Harry and I got married, she barely made it to greet us, and as far as I knew, she never came home to visit. Could it be that she was also looking to get money out of me? Frightened at the thought, I went to the cafe where she'd asked to meet.
Sorry for showing up out of nowhere after all this time.
This might have been the first real conversation I'd ever had with Harry's sister, Emma. Like Karen used to be, she was gentle and had a kind demeanor. Given my experiences with Harry and Karen, I found it hard to let my guard down around her. But as we talked, I somehow became certain that there was no malice in her. This woman had come here to help me. Emma then got to the point.
I never came home because of Harry. I loved our parents, but I'd always felt disgusted by Harry. I think it's his fault our mom ended up the way she did.
She then started talking about Harry's childhood. She had noticed his violent tendencies since they were kids. If something didn't go his way, he would throw a tantrum until he got his way. Over the years, those outbursts became less frequent, but instead, he started manipulating people he didn't like, bending them to his will.
He's confident and has initiative, doesn't he? That's why people around him were drawn to his charisma and followed him. He would crush anyone he didn't like, even getting others involved.
I thought it was Karen who had started bad-mouthing me, but apparently it was Harry who had fed her those negative thoughts. With her support gone after my father-in-law's death, Harry must have thought he could control her. He also justified his affairs by making it seem like it was my fault for not being able to have children, urging his mother to blame me. Karen, emotionally vulnerable, likely had no choice but to rely on the remaining son and began to hate me.
A while back, our cousin came to pay her respect at Dad's grave. After hearing what things are like now, I realized I couldn't keep running away anymore.
Emma had kept her distance from their family out of fear of her brother's violence. But now, with their father gone and their mother changed,
I need to deal with my mom and Harry. I know you've been suffering, Catherine, but please, you need to take back your own life too.
She gripped my hand tightly, as if trying to withstand her fear, and spoke with determination. Her hand was trembling slightly, and her palm was damp with sweat. And so, she and I joined forces, beginning to plan how to put a stop to Harry and Karen's behavior. Harry and Karen had nothing to say, so I had only learned about Emma in the past few weeks. She wasn't married and lived alone. She was a dedicated career woman, working in the HR department of an IT company. She used to be an engineer, and her sharp mind was still very much intact. Emma meticulously planned out what needed to be done to hurt Harry and Karen and free me from the mental hold they had on me. Of course, at that time, I didn't believe I had been brainwashed, so I only found out later what she meant.
Harry can't handle it if things don't go exactly according to his plan. So, Catherine, we need you to disappear for a while.
At the time, I couldn't fully understand what she meant. She told me to lie about a business trip and leave the house for a bit. But if I disappear, why not just leave the house forever? Emma smiled at my question and replied,
This is all part of the plan.
I was instructed to tell them I'd be gone for 2 days, but to return the next day. Even though I still had doubts, I decided to follow her instructions since she insisted it was the right first step. In the end, I returned home earlier than I had said I would and overheard the insults Harry and Karen were saying about me. After listening to what they really thought at the front door, I went straight to Emma's apartment. There, I spoke with her.
There was a specific reason I asked you to return home that one time.
But I didn't do anything. I tilted my head, not understanding what she meant.
I timed it so that, just as you were returning, I called my mom. I asked how Catherine was doing after Dad passed.
Hearing this, I slowly began to understand her scheme.
In other words, I stirred things up with my mom and Harry so they would badmouth you to break Harry's hold on your mind.
While talking to me, Emma realized that my mind had been affected. It was clear that Harry and Karen were saying unreasonable things, but I kept explaining that it was my fault. No matter how much Emma explained, in the end, I couldn't betray Harry and Karen. So she resorted to drastic measures. In other words, she let me hear directly what Harry and Karen really thought of me. Just as planned, hearing myself called worthless and ATM directly set my anger ablaze, and I finally realized how unreasonable they were. It made me want to grab them right then and there.
When you're told every day that you're the one at fault, it just becomes that way without you even realizing it.
Emma encouraged me, tears in her eyes.
You don't have any more attachment to those two, do you? You understand now that you were being treated unfairly, right?
I couldn't say that I felt no pain at the thought of betraying the mother-in-law who once cared for me, but I also knew I couldn't leave things as they were. Determined, I prepared myself for the final showdown. It had been about a week since I disappeared. My phone was filled with hundreds of missed calls, and I could see just how desperate Harry and Karen had become. Now that I had gone, their entire foundation had been shaken. If things continued this way, Harry would have no choice but to start working again. His plans had gone completely awry, and he seemed to be in a panic. For the record, I had also made sure to explain the situation to the authorities in case the police were called. I told them that I was hiding from my husband and Karen due to their constant verbal abuse.
All right, I think it's about time you reappeared. My guess is that Harry must have lost a lot in his desperation.
And so, Emma and I headed to their houses, the battlefield for our final showdown.
Where the hell have you been? You abandoned me and Mom, ignored our calls. You ungrateful piece of trash.
The moment I stepped into the houses, Harry came rushing at me, eyes bloodshot. It seemed like he hadn't been calm at all over the past week, and he hadn't even bathed. His clothes and body reeked, the stench hitting my nose. I grimaced and looked at Harry with nothing but contempt. Not long after, Karen followed him to the entrance, her face twisted in rage.
You heartless witch. You abandoned us and ran away. I'll have you arrested.
She also had disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes. They must have realized how bad things would get without me. The two of them hurled every insult imaginable at me. Did they really think that doing this would convince me to come back?
Stop humiliating me any further. Do you have any idea what Dad would think, seeing me like this?
As I calmly said this, Emma stepped forward from behind me and walked in. Her face was filled with anger, and she glared at both of them.
Why are you here? This is between me and my wife. Stay out of it.
Harry cursed at Emma, but she paid no attention to his words. She walked straight into the living room, her footsteps heavy and deliberate. Do you really have no idea why I left? I asked them, but Harry and Karen just looked at each other, shrugging in confusion. Were they pretending not to know, or were they genuinely clueless? I found myself astonished. You called me a worthless piece of trash and an ATM, didn't you? When I came home early, I overheard you both loudly bad-mouthing me. I stated the facts plainly, glaring at the two of them. They must never have imagined I'd heard them. A look of shock spread across Harry and Karen's faces. That's right. You never imagined I'd come back early, but if I hadn't, do you really think I would have heard those exact words? They kept insisting it wasn't true and denying it, but as they faced the cold stares of me and Harry's sister, their words gradually trailed off. It's really disappointing to know that's how you felt. This is outright disrespect, isn't it? You've hurt me far more deeply than you can imagine, yet you've only thought about yourselves. Realizing how bad things were getting, Harry opened his mouth.
Did you trick us? Acting like you're the victim here. Give me a break. What do you mean hurt? Mom and I are the ones who are shocked at what you've done to us.
Shocked? He didn't feel that way, not even a little. Don't twist the subjects. Right now, we're talking about the emotional pain I've suffered. Don't use convenient words like acting like a victim. I'm just stating the truth. I yelled loudly, refusing to let Harry and Karen control the conversation.
Harry, I heard you've been cheating on her. Although, from what I've guessed, that's probably ended recently, hasn't it?
Hearing Emma's words, Harry stiffened and glared at her.
Did she put you up to this? What the hell did you do?
Emma couldn't help but burst out laughing.
Is it my fault? Did you just try to get money from that other woman? You panicked about Catherine leaving and got scared about your future. You've always been like this. When things don't go your way, you panic and do something stupid.
Just like she said, Harry had gone to ask his mistress for money, and she dumped him. Desperate after I left, he dug himself deeper into trouble. Now he'd lost the woman he was infatuated with, and was about to lose his wife too. With no job, if I left him, Harry would lose everything. You really are an irredeemable idiot, aren't you? How did I ever let myself be controlled by a guy like you? I'm disgusted by my own stupidity. You know, your sister saw through everything you did and played you like a puppet. Harry was shaking with rage, his face bright red.
Cut it out. Both of you.
He slammed his fist down on the table and stood up. Neither I nor Emma were intimidated by this. We remained expressionless, fixing him with our cold stares. Do you understand the situation you're in? If I say I want a divorce, it's over for you. You won't be able to do anything or even make a living without me. Your life will be over. Just as Harry used to do to me, I threw those curse-like words right back at him, piercing his mind.
Mom, it's really unfortunate, but you need to take responsibility too. At least go to hell with your precious Harry.
After Emma finished speaking, I took a divorce form out of my bag. I had already filled in my part. After everything you've put me through, you don't think you can refuse this, do you? If you sign here, I'll at least hold off on calling the cops. I looked into Harry's angry face and spoke as if I were reprimanding a child. With trembling hands, Harry signed the divorce form. After carefully checking it, I showed it to Emma as well before putting it back in my bag. I won't call the police, but I'll definitely be getting alimony from you. I'm not backing down, so if you want to hire a lawyer, go ahead. Oh, but I guess you don't have any money left, since you can't do anything without me. I threw all the pain and resentment I'd been carrying back at Harry. I glanced at Karen, who seemed to have collapsed to the floor, crying. Emma had been recording everything on her phone just in case, so Harry couldn't lay a finger on us. Not that Harry had the guts to do that anyway. Did you really think you'd marry that young woman you fell for? It's honestly pathetic. Still unsatisfied, I left with those final words and slammed the door shut behind me. Thanks to Emma's help, I was able to escape from that hell. It feels almost like a lie now, thinking I used to believe I was the one at fault. Now, all I feel is hatred for Harry and Karen.
We can't get back the time you lost, Catherine, but at least I feel relieved now. If things had continued the way they were, an unimaginably tragic end would have awaited us. Now I can face Dad with pride.
Emma showed concern for me and continued to support me in various ways afterward. From what she told me about Harry and Karen's current situation, I can confidently say my revenge was a success. I took Harry to court over his infidelity and won as much alimony as possible. Apparently, the money came from what his mother had saved up just in case, but this outcome was the result of their own actions. Harry hasn't been able to find a decent job and has been doing hard physical labor on a daily basis, moving from one day job to another. Due to the stress and financial hardship, he's lost a lot of his hair and aged rapidly.
With his appearance and lifestyle now, I guess he'll never be able to go after his beloved women again.
According to Emma, Harry has completely broken down and cries himself to sleep every night. Those dark nights will never end, and he'll live with regret for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, his mother's mental health took a turn for the worse, this time for good, and Emma had her forcibly admitted to a hospital. According to the doctors, there's no chance she'll ever be discharged. If she had worked together with me to overcome things after my father-in-law passed away, she wouldn't have had to spend the rest of her life in loneliness. Now free from the long years of suffering, I've started a new life. No longer burdened by guilt toward anyone, I'm living for myself. Even at work, now that my worries are gone, things are going better than ever. Having the time to focus on myself has opened up a lot of new opportunities. And during this time, I found someone new in my personal life. I thought I was done with my marriage, but I met a man with a similar background to mine. Though he shared the same thoughts about marriage, we both ended up deeply in love with each other. We chose not to marry, but that decision actually made our relationship stronger. While putting ourselves first, we also take good care of each other. Sometimes things work out well precisely because both of us have been through painful experiences. Though I've missed out once again on my childhood dream of being a stay-at-home wife, I've regained my happiness. From now on, I'll keep looking forward and continue to walk my own path in life.